Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy, Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Today, I've got 8 Dynasty Buys for you, and we're going to run through a little bit of the NFL news. Got a few stories to talk about today. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, welcome in, everyone. Glad to see you all this morning on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on the podcast a little bit later as well, thank you for tuning in. Again, guys, you can find the Wake and Take podcast link in the description. Every Wake and Take episode hits the podcast feed as well. Good morning to you, Terminal Sarcasm. This time, no grounds in the drink, hopefully. Or I just shouldn't, drink the bottom of the coffee mug for no reason, really. I don't know why I drank that coffee yesterday. It was genuinely right at the bottom. I just should not have taken a sip. But, sometimes you're just in the flow. You'll want a sip of coffee. And even if there's no coffee, you still think there is. And then you just get stuck with grounds in your mouth the rest of the show. But we're not doing that today. Today, we've just got regular old coffee, and I won't go that far into the mug. Good morning to you, Ryan. Good morning to you, Dakota. And let's get into the show. We've got NFL news to talk about today. We'll start with just a couple news stories before I tell you the Dynasty Buys I have lined up for you guys. First off, the Cowboys running back room. As expected, they're going to be going with a committee usage. This weekend, McCarthy was asked what they are expecting to do with the return of Ezekiel Elliott, and he said, "We're running back by committee." I think he'll definitely play at the level he's played. I know in my time here that I anticipate that. I don't see any drop off in the way he moves. He's in good shape. He's come in here and picked up right where he's left off. In terms of the committee, I think it's really just the times that we're in. 17 games is a lot of football, and that's a big role for these guys. Don't get me wrong. They'd all like to carry it like the old days and have those touches, but you want those guys fresh at the most important time of the year. So it's all part of planning and how you look at projections of playtime. So sounds like Ezekiel Elliott is looking good in the limited times that McCarthy has seen him so far, but he just doesn't want to run him into the ground along with the rest of the running back room. So again, I urge you guys not only to maybe scoop up some Ezekiel Elliott for free, but probably go get some Rico Dowdle as well. And in your deeper leagues, maybe some Deuce Vaughn. I want to say my guy from the Senior Bowl, we'll go ahead. Let me double check this. I should have double checked it before the show. But I want to say, yes, my guy from the Senior Bowl, actually my standout running back, one of them outside of Marshawn Lloyd, was Michael Wiley. And he actually just signed as an undrafted free agent with them as well. He's a really good pass catching running back, which actually they do not have in Dallas. So that's another name to keep your eye on here, Michael Wiley. He's basically Deuce Vaughn with a little bit more, weight. Deuce Vaughn's a little bit of a small guy, whereas Michael Wiley, also small, but just weighs a little bit heavier. I think he actually hits that 200 pounds, whereas Vaughn doesn't. So anyway, that's the Dallas Cowboys running back room. Take a chance on all of them, really, in your deeper leagues. Running backs get hurt, and you never know who's going to end up getting you points. It might as well be Rico Dowdle, right? So anyway, that's the Dallas Cowboys room. It's time for some Falcons propaganda as Raheem Morris, head coach, is hyping up Kyle Pitts out in Flowery Branch. Right now, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution has been interviewing Raheem Morris, and this is what he had to say about Kyle Pitts. He's very excited about being healthy, and so are we. Getting a healthy Kyle Pitts gives you a really dynamic player that we believe in a lot. Hence the picking up of his fifth-year option, letting him be a part of our immediate and hopefully long-term future. If we can get this guy going, we all know what he could be. That's the job of the coach, to find out what a player can be and go get the best out of him. Hopefully myself, along with my staff and coaches, we can go in and get the best version of Kyle Pitts, because that will be good for all of us. Again, I tell you guys, go get some Kyle Pitts. Go get some Kyle Pitts. I've got another couple tight ends to talk about buying in dynasty leagues. Kyle Pitts is going to be one of the more so ones. He's not on this list because, as we'll talk about, I kind of wanted to keep it a little bit older. And Kyle Pitts is still really young, guys. Kyle Pitts is younger than Dalton Kincaid. Kyle Pitts is younger than Trey McBride. And he's been in the league already for 3 seasons. Now he's finally getting a quarterback upgrade, a coaching upgrade, and we can finally expect him to tap into his potential. We saw the 1,000-yard rookie season. This year, we should hopefully see 1,000 yards and touchdowns. There is a very, very strong possibility that Kyle Pitts is the dynasty tight end 1 again after this season. And at the worst, maybe dynasty tight end 2. But I think there's easily a path for Kyle Pitts to end up ahead of Dalton Kincaid, ahead of Trey McBride. Again, he's younger than them and arguably so has a little bit less target competition with a better quarterback, with a more kind of set in stone type of future as well. So Kyle Pitts, I know I'm a Falcons fan. I don't mean it to sound like a homer. I really do like Kyle Pitts' potential, regardless if he was an Atlanta Falcon or not. We haven't seen that kind of draft capital for a tight end before. We've already seen some production. We've seen minuscule production even with bad quarterback play as well. I mean, he still left a lot on the table last year in terms of points. He led the league in unrealized air yards. It's all there. It's all there for Kyle Pitts. It really is. So get him while you still can. Another player that you should be getting while you still can, although it's probably become a little bit more difficult, is Jared Goff. As yesterday, he becomes one of the highest paid players in NFL history and the second highest earning in terms of annual salary among quarterbacks in the league today, second only to Joe Burrow. He's signing a 4-year extension worth up to $212 million. 170 of that is guaranteed, making his annual salary about $53 million a year. It's easy to see why. I know that Jared Goff was sent to Detroit to die, but he did the opposite of that, resuscitating the Detroit Lions team that hadn't found really any playoff success in their history. He finished last year top 4 in both passing yards and passing touchdowns, had over 4,000 passing yards, had 30 passing touchdowns. The Lions offense was electric last year. They won the division title the first time in 30 years, won a couple playoff games, made it to the NFC Championship. I mean, Jared Goff had an incredible season last year along with the Detroit Lions, but he was a huge part of that. It understands why and it's understandable why they would pay him this much money. I know it's a lot, but they expect him to be with the team for a really long time. 4 more years. He's 29. So I mean, like 33, 34 when this contract expires, which isn't bad at all. You could probably even get another extension out of him if he's working well. So Jared Goff, I would say buy him in Dynasty if you can. I mean, again, usually when players get these contracts, there's a small uptick in value. But Jared Goff is just one of those players that people hate in fantasy football. You know, he's just a pocket passing quarterback relying on his weapons that has burned people before in his LA days. So people just look to get rid of him. He's sitting at like quarterback 20 right now. But as mentioned before, he was top 5 in passing yards and passing touchdowns last year, top 10 in points per game as well. An electric season. So Jared Goff, he is out there doing some good things, getting that extension. Another piece of news to talk about is a little bit of an update on the Tank Dell situation. I read this this morning, actually. It seemed that when Tank Dell got shot, there was really not much information out there. All we knew is that he was going to recover, have to go through physical therapy and all this stuff. You know, the head coach and the GM coming out and saying that, you know, we expect him to get back to the Tank Dell that we're used to. It just might take some time. Well, it seems that this gunshot wound was, you know, there's some more to the story that, you know, hasn't actually been reported on too much. I found a story here about it, and according to KPRC2 Sports, which is just a Florida sports or Florida news outlet, this is specifically their sports. The bullet actually went completely through his leg. It went through the front of his leg, out the back of his leg, leaving no shrapnel in his leg, which I think is both good and bad. I'm not a doctor, but I would assume that since there's no shrapnel in the leg, that would mean that it's easier to recover. But also, it seems concerning that it's gone completely through the leg, because then you have 2 bullet holes, and then whatever damage happened in the leg, and you need your leg to, you know, run routes and stuff. But we saw with Brian Robinson, even he got shot a couple years ago, got shot in the knee and the ass, and was able to recover and actually, you know, score some fantasy points. So I would just say, if anyone is skeptical of Tank Dell's health because of this, I wouldn't get too worried about it. It seems okay. And also to those of you who are, you know, on the knucklehead scenario here with Tank Dell, because it was reported that he was shot at a club. It wasn't actually really a club. I looked into the place, and he was actually just at like a nice bar. Really, I'll put it at nice bar. He was at a place called Cabana Live. I don't know why I said Cabana. Sorry about that, Floridians and people who like cabanas. Cabana Live, which is just like a beach bar. In Florida, like they have, like, it overlooks the water. You can get, like, you know, martinis and stuff. Like, it's not like you know, he was out partying. There's like, it's like a sports bar place too. Like, they've got TVs all over. He was just kind of watching the game, chilling. There's families there and stuff. And it turns out it was actually a 16-year-old that somehow had a weapon and came and shot 10 people. So that's very Florida. Very America, but I just want to say there shouldn't be much knucklehead talk here with Tank Dell. It seems he was at just a normal, cool place. and just ended up getting shot. And it also seems it was a clean shot, which should be good as well. So take Dell. Get him. And the last bit of news I have for you guys, I see a couple questions in here. We'll answer those after this. Marcus Valdes-Scantling has signed with the Buffalo Bills. Cool, right? It's not like we can expect Marcus Valdes-Scantling to ever be fantasy relevant again. He had his chance in Kansas City. If he couldn't do it with Patrick Mahomes, he's probably not really going to do it with Josh Allen. I'm sure he'll have some spike weeks and stuff, and I'm sure it becomes a valuable best ball target. But this is more so just good for the Buffalo Bills, good for Josh Allen. As a deep threat. We'll put quotes around it. I mean, he's got to catch the damn ball, but he's at least running routes pretty quick, stretching the field a little bit. And hopefully will lead to a couple more touchdowns or at least some more sustained drives, big chunk plays and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say that you're, rush to your waiver wire to get MVS. I mean, they still got Keon Coleman. They still got Dalton Kincaid. They still got Dawson Knox. They still got James Cook. They still have Curtis Samuel. They still have Khalil Shakir. There's just a lot of mouths to feed here, and you're never actually going to feel comfortable starting Marcus Valdes-Scantling unless there's an injury. I mean, if you're in a deeper league, then sure, get MVS. I'm sure he's sitting there on the wire right now or on a team that doesn't really want him. But for the most part, most leagues, I would say just leave him alone. This is more so a good thing for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. So that's it that I have for news for you guys. We'll now talk about some Dynasty buys. Before we get into that, why don't we run a quick little ad break and then answer some questions? This is some information on, let's go with Underdog. We haven't had an Underdog ad in a while.
This episode is made possible by Underdog Fantasy, and Underdog Fantasy is the leader in best ball. When you go to join an Underdog Fantasy best ball draft, it fills very quickly. Especially now, it's Best Ball Mania season, baby! Best Ball Mania 5! I can't believe they're at Best Ball Mania 5 already. $15 million in prizes. They're giving out $15 million with $1.5 million to first. Playing in best ball leagues makes you better. It helps train you on player value and strategy. And Underdog offers a lot more than just best ball contests. They offer pick'ems. My new favorite, the golf pick'ems. But they have the NBA pick'ems, baseball pick'ems going on throughout the offseason. Hit the pick'ems, back to best ball, hit the pick'ems. So use promo code Underworld. Promo code Underworld gets you a 50% deposit bonus up to $250. So they've increased the maximum deposit bonus. It was $100. Now it's up to $125. When you get the Underdog app, use promo code Underworld and go draft your ass off.
Go draft your ass off. I've been doing these Underdog drafts like crazy. I don't know why I got so last year I didn't do too many. I did like 10. I've already bumped myself up to like 20 this year. They're kind of fun. They're kind of fun. Kind of get addicted to this best ball stuff. But I see a super chat here from Matt Glore. Thank you so much for the super chat. 1 QB start 8. Would you trade Marvin Mims for Gabe Davis? My answer is yes. My answer is yes. I know that a lot of people are out there expecting Marvin Mims to become, a wide receiver 1 on the Denver Broncos. I just don't see it. I know the narrative last year was that Sean Payton, this was his first draft pick as a Denver Bronco. And then we saw the early success from him, and then he completely faded off once he actually did have success. Defense kind of got used to him, and he wasn't really getting open anymore. I think we would have seen a bit more from him last year. I mean, Jerry Jeudy just was not good. Cortland Sutton didn't ever really tap into the ceiling, even if he was scoring some touchdowns. Marvin Mims had some opportunity last year and didn't really capitalize on it. And I know that now Jerry Jeudy's gone, and he's kind of stepping into a bigger role. But I mean, the new quarterback, Bo Nix, we do know that he's being paired with his college teammate, Troy Franklin here. And it just looks like one of those situations where there's going to be a bit too many mouths to feed with an uncertain quarterback thing. Like, I think that Bo Nix will succeed. I think that Sean Payton and him will fit well. But there's a lot of people out there that don't really think that. And even then, if he does succeed, I still believe it'll be kind of on the backs of Troy Franklin and maybe the running game. So I think that Gabe Davis, while he has this negative connotation in the league, I think him going to Jacksonville, getting a solid enough contract is actually a decent opportunity from him. Christian Kirk has struggled to stay healthy, and Brian Thomas Jr. is kind of a boomer bust type guy. We don't know if he'll tap into the potential. We think he will with that athleticism, but Gabe Davis actually has a massive opportunity here. The Jaguars spread it around a ton. We saw Zay Jones have some spike weeks last year, and Calvin Ridley's gone as well. So I think that Gabe Davis, attached to a little bit of a better offense with a bit more of a clear potential for spike weeks and actually given us the performance before too. Plus, I want to say he's pretty young despite being in the league for a while. I think he came out early. So Gabe Davis, I think I'm going to lean on this one. Let's see, what is Tyreek Hill's trade value? You should be able to get a wide receiver 1 for him or a running back 1 from him. I would say shop him around, and I did trade him for a ton. I was able to do like Josh Jacobs plus, which I felt was pretty fair, get like another top end running back that's a little bit older and still get some fantasy points. But I do think that Tyreek Hill is a sell right now. I've talked about it a little bit before. Essentially, when you look at the other 30-year-old plus wide receivers, they're all like wide receiver 24 or later in terms of keep, trade, cut, and player profiler dynasty rankings, whereas Tyreek Hill is pretty across the board, marked as a top 12 wide receiver. And I get it with that ceiling, but we've seen time and time again with these aging wide receivers that their value can totally fall off a cliff. Cooper Kupp is very similar to Tyreek Hill, I would say, where he had this massive season, so he gets this huge dynasty boost despite being older, and then, has a down season, is all the way back down to like wide receiver 30-something. I can see that very much happening here with Tyreek Hill. It just takes one injury, a couple down weeks, and he's right there in the same realm as Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, and all those guys again. So I would sell Tyreek Hill while you can. And speaking of sells, why don't we talk Dynasty Buys? I've got 8 Dynasty Buys for you. Let's get on into it. The first one is going to be Kirk Cousins. As you guys remember, I was not a big fan of this signing for Atlanta, whatever. But I do think that it's very good for fantasy football. And with the draft pick of Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins' value has gotten even cheaper somehow than you would expect for a 36-year-old quarterback. He was already kind of cheap because of his age and injury. And now he gets even cheaper with the Michael Penix draft pick. He's sitting right now as quarterback 25 on Keep, Trade, Cut, and Player Profiler. But I don't necessarily think that's fair. I mean, prior to his injury last year, he was actually the quarterback 6 in total points from weeks 1 through 8, averaging 19.3 points per game, which was really solid. And, just especially in his time in Minnesota or the last few seasons, he's had 4,000 passing yards, except for last year in back-to-back seasons. And 21 and 22 had over 4,000 passing yards and 29 or more touchdowns, averaging 18 or more points per game, which has been top 12 in back-to-back seasons. Averaged 19.3 points per game last year, as already mentioned. And still has really, really good weapons in Atlanta with a solid scheme. In fact, a very similar scheme as the staying within this Los Angeles Sean McVay coaching tree. And he had some spike weeks last week. I already mentioned he was quarterback 6, but I mean, he had 29 points in week 2, 27 points in week 3, had a couple 20-point games mixed in as well, 4 more 20-point games that don't need the week number. So, he's performed well last season before the injury. And he's super, super cheap to acquire. Super, super cheap to acquire. So I would say get Kirk Cousins, especially if you're competing. I mean, of course, this is going to be super flex leagues, but I would say there's even a case in your 1 QB leagues to maybe go get Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix and just have your quarterback room of the future and just be done in your 1 QB leagues. I think that that's an easy scenario there. Some underlying metrics that were pretty impressive too last year. He was 6th in adjusted yards per attempt, 2nd in clean pocket percentage, 3rd in true completion percentage, 7th in accuracy rating, 8th in deep ball completion percentage, 5th in production premium, 7th in QBR, 3rd in passer rating. It's all up there. He was top 10 in both accuracy rating versus man and zone. So Kirk Cousins, slicing and dicing defenses, still has some left in the tank. Go into a good offense in Atlanta. I'm buying. And another old quarterback I'm buying is going to be Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford right now is 36.2 years old, so he's still up there in age. Him and Kirk Cousins are right around that 36-year-old mark. But that does show that they probably have a couple more seasons in them. I mean, Aaron Rodgers right now is 40. So they should at least play to 38, in my opinion. But Matthew Stafford right now is even cheaper than Kirk Cousins. He's sitting right now at quarterback 27 on both Keep, Trade, Cut, and Player Profiler. But we're only 2 years removed from him being the quarterback 5 overall in 2021. He threw for almost 5,000 yards and had 41 passing touchdowns, averaging 20.4 points per game, which was 11th in the league. His contract also he's still under contract until 2026. They do have an out after 2025. So worst case is you still get 2 more years of Matthew Stafford. Best case, you have 3 more years of Matthew Stafford in LA. And I know he had the injury concerns last year, but still, or 2 years ago, but still kind of bounced back last year, threw for almost 4,000 yards and had 24 passing touchdowns, averaging 17 points per game, which was really, really solid. And he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games over 20 points last year, had some solid underlying metrics as well. He was 4th in red zone attempts, which is awesome for touchdowns. He was 11th in total passing yards. 8th in yards per attempt, 7th in deep ball completion percentage, and actually had the second most dropped passes, which kind of leads us to believe that there might be some improvement next year. And now Cooper Kupp coming back a second year recovering from his ACL injury. Puka Nacua going into his second year in the league, then investing in a really good backup running back behind Kyren Williams, bringing in the new tight ends with Colby Parkinson. They've invested in this offense a decent bit this offseason. They're getting another year removed, or I guess another year together with last year's offense. I think that the Rams are an offense that we should be investing in for fantasy football, not just Matthew Stafford, but Cooper Kupp as well is someone that's super cheap right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has another at least wide receiver 2 type season from Kupp. You know, him and Puka Nacua could both finish as top 24 options with the way this offense runs. So Matthew Stafford is the guy kind of running it all. And 2 seasons now where he's had almost 4,000 yards on this offense with tons of touchdown potential. So I'm getting Matthew Stafford really wherever I can in my super flex leagues. Him and Kirk Cousins right now are some solid buys right now. Senior Football pointing out that Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury. Yeah, exactly. That's why he's so cheap. And if he gets hurt, then you can get Michael Penix for cheap right now too. I would say if you're getting Kirk Cousins, you should probably try to get Michael Penix. But either way, I mean, he's expected to have a good season. So we're excited about Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford over here. Another dusty guy I want to buy right now is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has signed a 1-year contract with the Minnesota Vikings, which is, not great. Like, you'd like to see a little bit longer term of a commitment, but he is 29.4, so he'll be almost 30 when the season rolls around. This is probably his swan song, but he's going to an offense in Minnesota that has struggled in the run game and needs someone like Aaron Jones. Last year, they were 28th in rush attempts, 29th in rush yards, and 30th in rushing touchdowns, the Minnesota Vikings were. So they desperately need an uptick. Alexander Mattison is gone, and Ty Chandler didn't do enough in his opportunity when starting. And the Vikings have kind of historically over the past couple seasons kind of featured one running back. Like, Ty Chandler didn't have more than 3 touches in a game until Alexander Mattison got hurt. And then he came in and was okay. A 10-point game, a 15-point game, a 7-point game, a 7-point game, a 20-point game, a 7-point game, a 9-point game, a 10-point game. Like, he was fine. But Aaron Jones is coming into a situation where he should be, the featured back, especially with a rookie quarterback. They're going to be leaning on him. He can catch passes and he can run between the tackles. Last year, he was actually 16th in expected points per game with 14.3, but finished with 12.3 points per game, which was not bad. That was actually 26th in the league. And when you talk about 16th in expected points per game and 26th in points per game, that's not too bad considering that he is actually sitting at RB 36 on Keep Trade Cut right now, which is some decent value. And he has been in his career nothing but a producer. 12 points per game last year, 14 points per game the year before that, 15 points per game the year before that, 18 points per game before that, 19 points per game before that. Like, just always consistently producing, scoring touchdowns, getting receptions, getting rush yards. Last year, he had started the year with a 27-point game and then kind of had some injury battles and never really truly got a focal point. But when he did, 20 carries in week 9, had another 18-point game. And then most importantly, to end the season after returning from his injury was awesome. From week 15 through 20, including the playoffs, 11 points, 14 points, 14 points, 19 points, 30 points, 17 points. The guy clearly still has something left in the tank, and he's going to an offense that should give him tons of opportunity next year, running him into the ground in his swan song final contract in the NFL, more than likely. And staying within the division, so going to have 2 Packers revenge games next year. If you're competing, I don't see why you wouldn't be buying Aaron Jones, a pretty cheap guy that's probably really easy to acquire in Dynasty because of his age. Get me some Aaron Jones on rosters, please. And another running back I want to buy right now, shout out Harry Snowman in the chat, Jerome Ford. Right now sitting at Keep Trade Cut RB41, PlayerProfiler RB42, but he's only 24 years old. And last year we saw some good games from him. He averaged 16.9 points per game. What is that? Something switched. That is Matthew Stafford's stats. He averaged 12.4 points per game last year with 200 rush attempts that he took for 800 rush yards and also added 44 receptions for 300 receiving yards and 9 total touchdowns. A really, really solid season from him, given that it was really his first time getting some opportunity with Nick Chubb going down early. But he had 1 game, 2 games, 3 games over 20 points and multiple games with at least 10 points. Again, he averaged 12.4 points per game, which was really solid and was featured a decent bit over Kareem Hunt. He had 204 rush attempts last year versus Kareem Hunt's 135. And for the most part, Jerome Ford was the featured back and scoring the most points. Kareem Hunt did, of course, have some games, but he's gone. So we're just now looking at a backfield where it's Jerome Ford and the 28, almost 29-year-old Nick Chubb returning from an ACL injury. Jerome Ford should have opportunity early in the season to be the bell cow while Nick Chubb gets up to speed. But I do expect, even when Nick Chubb is healthy, for both of them to share the rock a decent bit. In fact, I would say that honestly, both Ford and Nick Chubb are buys right now. But given that Jerome Ford is so much cheaper than Nick Chubb, surprisingly, then I'm just going to be buying in Jerome Ford. He's younger, showed some explosiveness last year, and the Browns were 4th in run plays per game last year. They pound the rock. They really, really do. And Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb, I expect to have some value, but Jerome Ford is cheaper, healthier, and at this point in his career, probably a bit more explosive than Nick Chubb, as much as I hate to say it. So buy Jerome Ford while you can, while the hype is starting to build for Nick Chubb recovering from his injury. Get Ford. Or maybe wait for the first highlight video of Nick Chubb to come out, of him running through those cones or something, and they'll be like, all right, Nick Chubb's back. Then you can buy Jerome Ford. Or you can buy Nick Chubb now, Jerome Ford later, Jerome Ford now if you don't want to risk it. Either way, I do view him as a dynasty buy right now at his current value. He could go down a little bit more once Nick Chubb fully recovers. But I don't know if I'd want to risk it. I think that I just want to get in on this rushing attack, get both Ford and Chubb if possible. But Ford for sure, as he's cheaper, younger, healthier, and a little bit more explosive. The next player that I'm buying right now is Christian Watson. You guessed it. You probably already knew I was going to talk some Christian Watson in this show. He's only 25 years old, attached to a very, very explosive Green Bay Packers offense that is ascending with Jordan Love going into his second season. And Christian Watson has lost some fantasy football value because of his health. He's right now sitting at wide receiver 43 on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 41 on PlayerProfiler. And that's mostly, again, due to his health concerns. He has torn his hamstring, basically, a hamstring strain last year, shoulder soreness before that, a knee sprain the year before that, a hamstring strain before that, a hip strain before that. Really just has struggled to stay healthy. But one of my favorite quotes at this point in my career as a fantasy football analyst is just, you're injury prone until you're not. People were avoiding Christian McCaffrey for years. People were avoiding Deebo Samuel for years. People always avoid these players that get hurt all the time. But at some point, they have a healthy season. And even when players are hurt, you can still throw them in IR and find a replacement while they're out. But the good news is that Christian Watson and the Green Bay Packers have been working hard this offseason to figure out what the hell is going on with his hamstring. The Packers are, quote, eager, trying to find a solution. I've sent him to hamstring specialists this offseason to really investigate what's going on. And they're going to take their time on it and really, really research and try to fix his hamstrings. And when I see that type of commitment from a team, it makes me firmly believe that they want him healthy so bad. They took him second in the second round 2 years ago now. And that is really, really high draft capital. And he's just got insane athleticism. He's 6'4", 210 pounds, but runs a 4.36 40-yard dash. All of his workout metrics at the 90th percentile or higher, 90th percentile college dominator. He's had the massive spike weeks as well. In 2022, he had a 32-point game, a 21-point game, a 21-point game, and then a 24-point game, all back to back to back to back to back. And last year we saw some of that too. A 10-point game, a 12-point game, got hurt, then a 10-point game, a 20-point game, a 28-point game, then got hurt. When he's out on the field, he scores so many fantasy football points. And if they do actually figure out his hamstring, then I think he's just going to be totally electric. You look at his game logs and it says he's played 20-something games. But actually, only 12 of those games has he seen a 70% or more snap share, and yet he's still averaged over 11 points per game both years in the league. The Green Bay Packers offense was top 15 in all passing metrics last year, 15th in attempts, 12th in yards, 3rd in passing touchdowns. Really, really good offense to attach yourself to, and the true primary threat on this offense when healthy. He is the guy that they go to in the red zone, deep shots, intermediate routes. It's him, and then Jaden Reed, kind of being the guy taking the more dirty routes, if you will. And Romeo Doubs is there as well. But Christian Watson is the guy with the ceiling on this offense, so I'm buying him while I still can. And another wide receiver I want to buy while I still can because is Tyler Lockett. Because once the season comes around and he scores his first touchdown, he's going to be hard to acquire. And he's just the perfect end of bench cheap guy that you can rely on in a pinch for your flex. Tyler Lockett in his career has done nothing but produce. 12 points per game last year, 15 points per game the year before that, 15 before that, 16 before that, 15 before that, and 14 points per game before that. Since 2018, has averaged at least 11 points per game every single season. And last year, he had 7 games with more than 15 points and 3 of them with more than 20, averaging 7 targets a game. And they're bringing a new offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, who's coming over from the University of Washington. And last year, the University of Washington had the second most pass attempts in college football with 574. And they were only 3 away from leading college football in pass attempts. Hawaii had the most at 577. And they also led NCAA in passing yards last year. Of course, a lot of that's going to come down to Penix and Odunze. But I just want to bring home the point that Ryan Grubb likes to pass the ball, because they were also bottom of college in rush attempts with only 411. That's right. They almost had 200 more pass attempts than they did rush attempts. Just clearly a guy who likes to sling it. And they have now 3 wide receiver sets. I'm assuming they're going to be running with just a whole new philosophy change. They've got Metcalf, they've got Lockett, they've got JSN. Lockett's still going to have his spike weeks. And he's actually done a really solid job over his career staying healthy. 17 games last year, and then from 2022 to 2017, played in 16 games in all of them. So, been a picture of health. And if you actually go look at Tyler Lockett clips, he purposefully avoids contact a lot to try to stay healthy. So I am investing in Tyler Lockett, even if he is 31 and a half years old. He's sitting right now at wide receiver 72 on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 65 on Player Profiler, and I would gamble that you could probably almost get him for free. At the very worst, you could get him as a throw-in in a trade, or like maybe a 3rd-round rookie pick for the future if you have to, and maybe even better, right? Like Tyler Lockett is so easy to acquire right now, especially with DK Metcalf and JSN both being top 30 dynasty options. Tyler Lockett's kind of this guy that's forgotten about, but he is still a focal point of this offense, still there, and still a consistent producer. So give me some Tyler Lockett. I've got 2 more buys for you guys, and really they're going to fall in the same realm. I don't really have to go into too much detail here, so I'll just say it. It's Mandrews and it's TJ Hawkinson. Both of those guys are really, really good tight ends. We'll start with Mark Andrews, who right now is Keep Trade Cuts tight end 7 and Player Profiler's tight end 5, which of course seems really high. But when we're talking about tight ends, it's more important to talk about player. And right now, Mark Andrews is like player 49 and TJ Hawkinson is like player 48, which is way, way down there in the list for guys who are at, a scarce position with massive, massive ceilings. Mark Andrews over the last 3 seasons, 17 points per game, 13 points per game because he was injured, and then 20 points per game when he finished as the tight end 1. And he's just, again, done nothing but produce in his career. Sorry, again, it's bringing up Matthew Stafford's stats. Why does it keep doing that? Okay. Sorry. Mark Andrews over the last 3 seasons has averaged 13.5 points per game, 13 points per game, and 18 points per game when he finished as the tight end 1. And last year, despite having the injury, was still pretty good. He was 4th amongst tight ends in target share, had the 4th highest route participation, was 7th in air yard share, 2nd in total touchdowns, despite missing so many weeks, was 6th in expected fantasy points per game. And really the list goes on and on. Mark Andrews is an alpha in this offense and is really, really cheap right now, at least compared to his historical pricing. Again, I talk about him being like tight end 7 right now. He was, of course, tight end 1 just a couple seasons ago, and it took the house to be able to acquire him, especially in tight end premium leagues. Now you could get him for a reasonable price. It's still going to hurt you. Like if you go to keep trade cut right now, here are the players around him: Michael Pittman, J.J. McCarthy, Drake May, Travis Etienne, DJ Moore, Devon Achane, Jared Goff, DK Metcalf, Nico Collins, T. Higgins, Kyron Williams, Zay Flowers, Tank Dell, Jordan Addison. But all those players, I think that you should be able to trade them for Mark Andrews fairly easily. And I even like here, it points out that a 2026 first round pick is pretty close to Mark Andrews' value as well, which I just think is absurd compared to how he used to be valued. All of those names, by the way, again, are very close to TJ Hawkinson as well. Both of these tight ends, Mark Andrews and TJ Hawkinson, are valued about the same right now, but they both have these massive ceilings and are acquirable right now. Again, TJ Hawkinson, especially before the injury, was tight end 1 in Dynasty and was killing it last year. He was averaging the second most points per game and was sitting at tight end 1 before being injured. He only played in 15 games, but still finished with 960 yards and 5 touchdowns and had over 120 targets and nearly 100 receptions. And if you look at his game log, he only had 1 game under 9 points. That's just incredible. On top of that, he had 1, 2, 3 games over 20 points, one of them being even a 30-point game, 11 receptions, 134 yards, and a touchdown. These players, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, can give you a true edge at the tight end position. And yes, they're kind of expensive, but they're not as expensive as they should be. So I am buying them, locking down my tight end of the future. TJ Hawkinson is only 26.8. Mark Andrews only 28.7. Both of those are fine ages for tight ends. It seems old, but it's really not that bad. So get them while you still can. Those are my 8 Dynasty buys. Do we have any questions? Who's the third running back on the Browns depth chart? It is either Deontay Foreman or Pierre Strong. I'm not totally sure. Watson and Eric Stokes went to the specialist, and Watson's dad claims that they figured out what was going on with his hamstring. So cool. If we were to believe Christian Watson's dad, then they are good. Fantasy Plumber says hamstrings usually get worse, not better. This is true. Hamstring injuries are very annoying, but they're going to a specialist and really working on trying to figure this out. And even then, we've seen just some massive ceilings from him when he's out there. So yes, Wicks is going to move up, might even start as number 2. I highly, highly, highly doubt it. Highly doubt it that Dontavian Wicks even gets to wide receiver 3. He's the wide receiver 4 on the Packers. It's Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks. I know he had some good weeks last year, but he's not a starter. He's just not. Let's see. Nice. I've convinced someone to buy some Tyler Lockett. Let's go. At least with Aaron Jones, his injuries are baked into the value. This is true, but I mean, he ended the season on a tear returning from the injury. So I don't really care about the injury with him. He seems fine. Let's see. Buy Matthew Stafford. Do it. Are you worried about likely taking targets from Andrews? No, because he hasn't done it at all. Every time that Mark Andrews has been out there, Isaiah Likely has basically been on the bench. So no, I'm not worried about it at all. I'm on the post-hype Chig train. I don't mind this buy, guys. I actually don't. Chig Okonkwo is going to an offense that's going to pass the ball a ton. And we saw in Cincinnati, the tight end wasn't necessarily featured, but heavily used. Like they averaged around 5 to 6 targets a game, whether it was Hayden Hurst or the guy before that, CJ Uzoma. So yeah, I don't mind the Chig buy. I do think that the Callahan going over there should be a good coach for Chig. It's not like I'm expecting much ceiling, but I think he could give us a nice little floor next year and at least retain his dynasty value. Is Tutu Atwell super dead? Yes. Yeah. You can drop that type of player, really, unfortunately. But that should do it for all the questions. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. This is another fun episode of Wake and Take. I'll see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Player Profiler, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you want more from me, you can follow me on my social media accounts at JFootballWine on all the social media channels. Go find me there. And again, hit the like button for Player Profiler. Hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to get notified when we go live. So many great shows coming out here daily on this channel. So again, thanks for tuning in and have a terrific Tuesday and wonderful rest of your week. Peace.
Hey, I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast. If you have any thoughts on it, leave a comment. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to see more shows on the Player Profiler channel, subscribe to it. That's how we know you want more.